Okay. Good morning, everyone. We are thrilled to be part of DameConf, and today I and Prasad will be presenting from chaos to control on the topic mastering Kubernetes backup and restore with Velero. So before we dive into, we'll let you know who we are. Okay, I am Aziza Karol, engineering manager in Red Hat, and it's been fantastic to be in as a part of Red Hat and leading global team. And I have been focusing on cloud and virtualization projects. So with 17 years of experience, I have gone through multiple roles, transitioned from individual contributor to the leadership, and I hail from land of beaches, that is Goa, but I'm basically based in Pune, and it's been 14 years with Red Hat. So, I'm using Linux for the past 20 years, and while I'm not managing teams, I manage my two energetic boys, 6 and 12 years old, and I feel that's more challenging role than the leadership role that I have been. So that was my small introduction. Over to Prasad.
Hello everyone, can you hear me? Yeah. Good morning, guys. My name is Prasad. I'm from Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar, Maharashtra. I'm currently working as a senior software quality engineer at Red Hat. I have overall 3+ years of experience in software testing. In my free time, you will find me playing video games all the time. So that's all about me. Thank you so much. Yeah, over to Aziza.
Thank you, Prasad, for the short introduction. Okay, so today we'll be covering, we'll just share the agenda. These are the main topics we will be covering: the risk of no backup, why data protection is required in Kubernetes, and what is a tool that will help you, save your workloads in Kubernetes. That is Velero. We'll dive more about its features, what features it has, and we'll show the types of backups that it supports, and we'll do a live disaster recovery scenario with you, and followed by question answers. So, before I start, I believe everybody needs backup. For just an example to start with, Google Photos. You have all your Google Photos. Suppose you have no backup and it's just accidentally delete all the things. You panic, right? Because you all have all your photos saved and all your whatever memories you have. So you panic. It has happened to me, by the way. I had lost my all kids' photos because I didn't enable the backup, and I regret that. But that was a simple example to start with. So consider a large-scale deployment like Kubernetes. So just to set the context, I have given you that example. So stateful applications, where the applications are really stateful, where you store back and forth data. Without backup, it's a huge loss. So it relies on persistent data. So therefore, it's important that we need to have the backup. And why it's important? Sometimes there may be a situation like cluster failures or network outages, which leads to a long recovery time, and you might have permanent data loss. So that's also a risk, if you don't have a backup. Human errors like accidental deletions or misconfigurations. For example, you just kubectl delete, boom, you're done. So that human errors can happen. And disaster recovery scenarios like natural calamities or data center lost, or they are extremely challenging without a robust backup. So whether it's you have a good network or you have a good anything can happen. That's what I mean to say. So it's important that you need to have a backup strategy. Without a strategy, it's nothing. So over to next slide. So why data protection in Kubernetes? For those, how many of them use Kubernetes here? Okay, good. Okay. So how many have managed workloads in Kubernetes? Okay. So do you have any disaster recovery tool, or what you do in case of you?
Right now I'm managing or I'm using GitHub, so Git is my disaster.
Okay, that's good. Fine. Okay, that's good. So for those who doesn't know Kubernetes, it's just our orchestration tool for managing deployments, scaling, containerized application. just to set the context. So, okay, why data protection? So there is a challenge, there's a caveat in Kubernetes. The thing is that Kubernetes doesn't natively support backup. So all your applications and deployments, they are vulnerable. So it's very important that you have some solution to restore all your backup, restore for cluster, all your persistent data. If you want to workload migration from one cluster, so and suppose you want to also schedule that. So this, we need a solution. So that solution we are trying to share is that Velero. So that's how Velero comes into the picture. We'll share what is Velero, introduction to Velero. Velero is nothing just an open source tool for managing your disaster recovery of Kubernetes clusters and persistent development. So whatever problems you have in Kubernetes for managing, backup and restore, so Velero can handle it. Earlier it was called as Happito. It's simple to use. It can work on cloud, on premises. It's just a client-server model where you have a server on the cluster where you manage backup, and the client you can create, and restore the backup with the commands. So that's a little bit about Velero. Okay. So in order to use this, you need to have object storage. Object storage is nothing but storing of your objects on the cloud provider in terms of buckets. We'll see an example. So you need to have an object storage in order to store your data. That's what I mean. And below are the storage providers that are supported: Amazon, S3 Cloud, and Microsoft Azure. Any S3 API compatible provider like Nuba and Cephredos, Minayo, so it's all support. Addition to that, it also supports community like versions like Alibaba and DigitalOcean, so that's also possible. More about it you can find in the docs, so everything is in the Velero doc if you want to find and more details about it. So based on your requirement and use case, you have to select which object you want your data to be stored, storage provider. So that's a little bit about requirements. Moving on to next. Okay, now we'll just dive into key features of Velero, which it might be interesting. So back up your Kubernetes cluster and volume. So what I mean to say here, if you don't want to back up your entire cluster, Velero provides a feature that you can restore your backup entire cluster using namespace. For example, you have a 10 namespace and you just want to instead of backing up entire cluster, you don't space, you just back up with namespace. Out of 10, you can just specify 2 namespaces and your backup will be done using the Velero. And you can also specify label selector. There is an option where you can just write the resource name, and that also is possible. Setting schedule, automatically kick off at recurring consoles. Suppose you don't want to be available every time, you can set a cron job at a certain interval of time. And for example, today, day after tomorrow, at certain you can set schedules with the Velero. That's also possible. Migrate workload across different clusters from one version to another. If you want to do that, that's also possible with Velero. So yeah, these are the features which Velero provides, but there are many more. Configure pre-host and backup restore hookups. Suppose you want to perform a custom operations. At the time of backup, you want to set or freeze your database at a certain particular time to have a snapshot consistency. So you can perform all those operations with hooks. That's also possible. Incremental backups. For example, you don't want to initiate full backups. In order to save your cost, your backup times, you can do part by part incrementally. That's something Velero supports, and it's a very good feature. Pluggable architecture. So now each cloud provider has its own plugin, which is being used for Velero for taking up backup and restore. So you can write your own plugins, or you can perform your own, you can add some whatever additional operations that you want to do with the backup and restore. So Velero has that opportunity. So based on your, you can optimize. Yeah,
I have a question. So can we use another PV as a backup, or does it have to be like these cloud providers backup?
Yeah, persistent volume also can be.
No, as a backup store, can we give it another PV instead of you guys 3 what
No. No, there is a strict requirement.
There's requirements. Like
We will need to have an object storage for storing the backup.
Yeah. Okay, so base, yeah. Okay, so we'll just dive into, we'll follow up more questions at the end. We are open for questions. We'll just complete this, okay? So Velero provides CRDs, that is custom resource definitions. Custom resource designations is nothing but a mechanism where you can define a schema for defining a custom resource. While Velero supports all these custom resources, well, when you just install Velero, you will see all these custom resources inbuilt, but you can have and also you can see additional ones, but these are the basic ones which are you will see in the live demo how this backup restore custom resources are used. So backup is just for backing up operations where you can specify the resource to backup. You can mention here restore, you can specify from where to restore operations. Schedule is a Velero operations, another backup storage location where you can define from which bucket, for example, AWS, or whatever bucket you have, you can specify that. And volume snapshot location where you can define from where your snapshots can be stored. Okay, so suppose you have US East, there are multiple regions across, for example, AWS US East or EC2 West or something. There are multiple things, so you can use it. So yeah, moving on next. Well, we'll see how these are being used in the live demo, so which Prasad will be sharing. Well, types of backups. Now, Velero supports multiple types of backups and the methods. So it's Kubernetes, it's backups, Kubernetes resources, all like deployment, service, and config max. So that's also possible with Velero. And it's also backups the internal images if you have. So that's, and persistent data as well. Now, persistent volumes use various methods. So there are multiple methods where you can use. We will not share, we will specifically look into CSI snapshot in the live demo, but there are file system backup. For file system backup, there's another method called Restic and Copia, which you can use. You can use cloud provider snapshot, CSI data mode. So we don't have much time, so we're just skipping it. But we'll focus on the live disaster recovery and show it use CSI snapshots method, how you can, do your disaster recovery in that. So yeah, that's all about. Over to Prasad to understand about a little bit of workflow.
Yeah. Let's take a look at a simple Velero workflow. So we'll understand how Velero works, and then we'll dive in more with a demo. So as you can see on the left side of the screen, you can see there is a section for a backup and restore. So in section of backup, so basically Velero consists two components. First is server and there is client. So server typically runs on Kubernetes cluster, and you can use the client to interact with server. Like for example, if you would like to create a backup, restore, and stuff like that, that you can do via client. So as you can see here, so I have two Kubernetes cluster here, cluster A and cluster B. So this is a good demonstration diagram for you can see it as like disaster recovery as well. For example, if you lost a cluster A, then same backup can be restored to cluster B, or you can see it as a like migration activity, like migrating a workload from cluster A to cluster B. You can see it both ways. So here, as you can see here, I am using this Velero backup create command for creating a backup. So when you run this command, what Velero client does, it creates a backups here in your cluster. So Velero server consists multiple type of controllers like backup controller, restore controller, backup sync controller. So the job of this controller is to look for the CRs. Like for example, backup controller will keep watching on the namespace, and when it finds a backup CR, it will validate the request, hey, whether the request is validated or not. And then if the request is valid, then it will start processing the request. So once, as you can see here, as you can see in the command, I'm creating a backup. So Velero backup create my backup. My backup is the name of my backup. And you can see hyphen included namespace as example. So we have deployed a namespace called as example in our cluster, and then we are using the snapshot volumes to persist your PVCs. So when you run this command, then the backup object got created, and it knows like, hey, you would like to back up a single namespace here. So what Velero will do, Velero will call the API server, collect all the objects that are part of that namespace, and it will store into the bucket as a JSON. So once it done with the operation, it marks a backup as a completed, and a restore set the similar operations. Like when you create a restore CR, so the job of restore controller is to reconcile that CR, check whether the request is valid or not. If it's valid, then it will restore all the objects into your Kubernetes cluster. So in the middle, you can see this is your object storage. So my backup is stored into your object storage. So it can be GCP, AWS, Azure, whatever provider you have, but it should be a object storage. Yeah, so we'll see it in a live demo, like how you can create a backup, how you can install a Velero. So let's go ahead and share a demo. Okay. Oh, sorry. There are two ways to install Veleros. You can use Velero CLI and you can use Hemchat as well. The installation process involves like two things, like installing Velero and configuring the backup storage location. So the backup storage location is nothing but your bucket. So it will have the bucket name, the region for the bucket, and the credential to access the bucket. So Velero will use the details, and you can file more detail like how to configure your Velero to work with AWS bucket, GCP, Azure, or whatever cloud provider you have. So you can follow this doc for more information. Let's go ahead and see it in live action. Okay. Is my screen visible? Yeah. So you can see this is the page for Velero documentation. So you can go ahead and see. So this is the Velero page. You can go to the releases section. You can see this 1.15.2 is the latest one. From here, you can download the tar file for your architecture. Sorry, it's a little bit blur here. So I have already downloaded the binary for Velero, as you can see here. And I'm just running the Velero version command. So for this demo, I'm using this Velero 1.15.2 version. Now, I have already created a Kubernetes cluster and logged into that. So you can see the Kubernetes version as well. So I'm using 1.32.1 version. And yeah, let's go ahead and look at the documentation for the providers. So you can see there are multiple providers available, and there are multiple supported by community as well. So for this demo, I will be using the GCP bucket for storing our backups. And so that's why we'll only focus on the GCP part for now. So you can see the GCP documentation for the plugin. So each provider requires a plugin in order to work with. So we have a plugin for GCP as well. So you can see the documentation here. And you can see the compatibility version between plugin and Velero. So as we are using Velero 1.15.2, so we'll be using a plugin version as 1.11.x. And there are a few steps you need to perform before like taking backup. So you need a bucket, you need a appropriate permission for that. So for this demo, I have already done that. I created a bucket in GCP. And as you can see here, I'm using the Velero install command for installing and configuring the backup storage. So here I'm using the GCP bucket for doing all the stuff. So that's why our provider name is GCP, and I specified the plugin for GCP. Backup buckets is for specifying the bucket name, and the secret file contains all the secrets to access the bucket. And we will be in the demo, we'll be looking at the CSI snapshots volume. So that's why we have enabled the CSI flag. So you can see Velero has created some CRDs here, some namespace. As you can see, Velero created a namespace called as Velero. And you can see the more stuff related to that, service accounts, then backup storage location. Then you can see it created a deployment as well. So let's go ahead and check the Velero pod. So this is where our server is running in a Velero namespace. So as you can see, our server is up and running. So let's go ahead and check the backup storage location. So backup storage location is where you will store all the backup related data. So as you can see here, my bucket name is GCP. My provider is GCP. The bucket name is ODP something, and the phase is available. So if something is wrong with your bucket or credential, then you will see unavailable or pending phase here. And I have access, read-write access to my bucket for uploading the backup and retrieving it. So let's go ahead and check. So I have deployed a sample application in my cluster. So basically, it has a MySQL pod and a to-do-list pod. So some pods. And I have a PVC as well to persist that data. So whatever data we'll adding into the MySQL application will be persisted by this persistent volume. And you can see I have some services and stuff like that as a part of my namespace. So I have UI for this application. You can see the UI as well. So before taking a backup, we'll add some data here, some dummy data, and we'll check whether the data is back after the restore. So I'm just adding a prepare a demo for DevComp, some random text here. And you can see the text has been added to the UI. Let's go ahead and trigger a backup. So I will be running this Velero create backup command and then the name of backup. And here we will be just focusing on a single namespace backup, but you can do entire cluster backup or like part of the namespace depending on requirement. Or you can also specify the label selector here. So as you can see, I have already run the Velero create backup command. You can see the backup request has been successfully submitted, and you can see more details about backup like using the describe and logs command. So let's check the backup CR is created or not in the Velero namespace. So as you can see, my backup CR got created 29 seconds ago. And let's check the status for that. Yeah, let's check the status. Now you can see here my kind is backup. The name is test backup, so whatever you specified in the Velero command line. And you can see in the spec section, I have this included namespace field specified. And in this demo, I'm just backing up a single namespace. That's why I have specified my application namespace. Under the status section, you can see more detail about the backup. Like we use CSI snapshot way to back up the persistent volume. So you can see the attempted and completed count. So we had just one PVC, so that's why the count is 1. Phase, you can see phase is completed. That means your backup is done. And you can see the number of items it backed up during the backup process. So there were 61 items in your namespace. So let's go ahead and check more details, like how you can check which resources Velero backed up during the backup process. So you can use this command, Velero describe backup command, -- details for checking more information. And let's see. So you can find all the information here as well, like the name of backup, the phase. In the namespace section, you can find the namespace you mentioned during the backup process. Under resources list section, you can see all the resources such as deployment, replica set. There are some events as well, namespaces, persistent volume claim, secrets. So it backed up all these resources during the backup process. And under the backup volume section, you can see, as we talked about in previous slide, there are multiple ways to back up your persistent volume. So here we are using the CSI snapshot way. So as you can see, the result is succeeded and bytes size of the volume. So let's go ahead and try to create some disaster. So I'm manually removing the namespace. So you can assume that a cluster has been lost due to some outages or any natural disaster happened on your data center. And let's go ahead and check the application status now. So as you can see, the application is now unavailable. So we'll try to create a restore here. So same, we are using the Velero restore create command for creating the restore. And here we'll specify the -- from backup file, backup, and the name of backup. So my backup name is test backup. So I will just hit enter. And you can see it submitted the request successfully. And you can check the more details about it in the describe and log output. So let's go ahead and check whether Velero was able to successfully restore our pods or not as well. Yeah, let's check the status first for the CR. And we'll check about the pods as well. Yeah, as you can see, the same thing. The name of the restore, the kind is restore, and the stuff like that. Under spec, you can see the name of my backup. So you can specify whatever backup name you have. Under the excluded resources, you can Velero has the ability to include and exclude namespace, resources, namespace, and all kind of stuff. So you can do with that. Under the status section, you can see the phase is completed. That means your restore is done, and you can see the count here, a number of items restored and successful. So let's go ahead. Let's head back to our application namespace and check whether the pods are running or not. So yeah, here you can see my pods are restored back 85 seconds ago. So my MySQL pod and to-do list pod is back. Let's go ahead and check PVC and SVC resource as well. So as you can see, my PVC is in bound state, and there is a SCC resources also got created back. Now let's head back to our UI application and check whether its status is available or not. So as you can see, my application is back, and the text we added before taking a backup is also restored. Yeah, that's it for the demo. Yeah, if you have any questions, yeah, feel free to ask.
Yes, okay. I think there are questions. Well, let's.
You can find more details about Velero in the Velero docs related to if you want to understand more about how Ristic and Copia works. So you can follow the documentation here, and also you can join the Velero user Slack channel in Kubernetes server. Yeah, that's all. If you have any,
So-
yeah.
Yeah, we'll be open for questions, just we're winding up, okay? So yeah, finally, thank you, Prasad, for showing a live disaster recovery scenario by enabling the CSI Schnappnot method, well, where the application was, we consider that application was, deleted, and then we try to restore it, and that's how the application was available later. So that's how it's done in the bigger production, big companies where you want to take large-scale deployments. The key takeaway, what we want to share is that Kubernetes is powerful, but there is no built-in backup. So you have to have the tool or workloads in order to save your workloads and, before the disaster strikes. And Velero is your tool, which it's kind of a superhero, which will save your workloads, and and helps secure data. And it's easy to use, and it's the most loved tool in the Kubernetes ecosystem, and you have to ensure your business continuity. Thank you all for listening, and that's a wrap. We are open for questions. Yeah. Yes, I think we have the questions.
Thanks. I actually missed the first couple of minutes of the session. I'm not sure if you covered it, but I had two questions. First one, is the backup restored can be done on a different cloud itself? Let's say I have running on GCP and doing on AWS, that's right. And second, do we have any performance benchmarks for this? Kind of, let's say, this is a very small application, 1 GB PVC and everything, right? But let's say I have a cluster with, say, terabytes of data. How that can be restored? Or if I take a snapshot, right? What timeline it will take for a restore, kind of that?
Okay. So that will depend on your data, like what, how much infrastructure data you have available.
So let's say I have
Mic is there? Mic, we need a mic.
PVC sizing up to
Okay.
5 dB, for example, right? And it's 50% filled in. So is the 2.5 dB of data that is getting backed up to, let's say, GCP bucket. And let's say I want to forget about intra-cloud, on the same cloud I want to restore it. So do you know how much that is?
Yeah, so Velero also does some kind of performance testing on top of Velero, and we also do some from Red Hat side as well. So you can find more details about that in the Velero documentation. So yeah, I can share the links with you. And regarding your first question, so is it possible to back up and restore from one cloud to another? So answer is yes. You can back up from one Kubernetes cluster. Depends on whatever cloud it might be. You can restore it to.
But let's say storage classes are different, right?
Right. So there is a feature in Velero called as PVC mapping. Yeah, storage class mapping. So you can map your storage class as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. Thank you for the wonderful session. When we say the backup is stored in the object storage, is it stored as an incremental? For example, I am taking a regular backup on a daily basis. Will it be consuming all my space, or it will be incremental backup?
Okay, so there are two things involved here. So first is Kubernetes resources, and the second one is your persistent volume backup. So first, for persistent volume backups, that will be incremental. Like if you use Copia or Ristic, then that will be incremental. Snapshots are always incremental, but it depends on cloud provider. So for example, if you use Azure, then there is a field called as incremental. So you have to set it in your cloud provider. So all the snapshots will be incremental. But for GCP and AWS, I have tested it. So the snapshots are always incremental. So yeah. And what Velero does, like whenever you take a backup, so it backs up Kubernetes resources all the time, but the volumes will be, the volume data will be incremental all the time. Yeah.
I have two questions. One is when we are doing a backup, is any way I can encrypt the backup itself while doing a backup? And the second question is, if my backup fails, do Velero provides way to alert or anything like that?
So for first question, so you can increment your backup. So you can use KMS key, SSC key encryption while doing the backup. So you can follow the documentation.
Velero supports this encryption, so it's possible to do that.
For the second question, I forgot.
Yeah, failure.
Yeah, failure. So yeah,
Failure.
you can configure your Prometheus or Grafana. So Velero has this metrics, so you can grab the data from there and you can notify users, hey, the backup is failed. Yeah, you can do that.
So yeah, I have question about we saw everything about backup and restore. So I have question about retention. Means you spoke about taking daily backups, and first would be till when they will be retained, and is currently Velero supports does Velero manages those retentions, or that needs to be taken care at the cloud end?
Okay, so when you create a backup, there is a field called as TTL, time to live. So you can specify the timeline for the backup to 1 year, 2 year, whatever time you would like. So by default, it's set as 30 days. So backup will automatically get expired after 30 days, but you can adjust that time. So the field is called TTL. So you can set it via at the time of backup creation.
Okay, that means it can be managed at Velero.
Yeah.
So that's their retention policies, right? We have.
Okay, actually there was nothing about retention, so I was.
So yeah, within 30 minutes we
Yeah,
could
so we had a
cover
lot to
only
cover.
this much.
Because yeah, retention is also a
Yeah.
big thing.
Yeah, totally agree. So you can do that. So you can manage it at the time of creating.
While we can continue speaking, so it's a huge topic, but we had to cover in 30 minutes.
Okay,
So.
yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for the session. So coming from support background, we have a majority of the scenarios where customers have a limited time window for upgrade of Kubernetes cluster from one version to another one. Now, sometimes, in fact, most of the time they fail and their window is over. And now generally they ask, how can I go back to the previous version? So with using Velero, do we have that provision where I can take a backup of n-1 complete, and then if something goes wrong, I can come back, including control plane, data plane, everything? Or
So you saw while creating a Velero backup, while creating restore, we specified the -" from backup flag, right? And you specified the backup name. So you can specify the whatever backup from you would like to restore. So that you can do. Before upgrading the cluster, we will take a backup, right? And that can be restorable.
And that can be restored to the new cluster,
New
whatever
cluster or the
upgraded version you want to upgrade.
yeah, I mean, if upgrade doesn't happen, let's say I want to go from Kubernetes version X to Y, and upgrade doesn't happen successfully, and I need to bring the production load back on Monday morning. This is Sunday night.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to my previous version again. So with the backup, I can go back to that, right?
Yeah, right. So
For the business.
you will have to provision your Kubernetes cluster. The cluster should be there. So Velero should be running on that. Then only you will be able to restore. So you will have to, user have to create a cluster, and then then they can restore again. I mean, there should be no problem restoring.
Okay, thank you.
Even if the Velero is uninstalled, you can reinstall.
Right.
Anything can be done.
Thank
No
you.
problem.
Hello, good session. TIL, I thought Velero was only for PV backups, but today I learned it's for Kubernetes resource as well. So my question is around that, right? So when you have a namespace and then when you say the Kubernetes resources would also get backup, how does that work? Is it only well-known group kinds like apps v1, core v1, and the likes, or does it also include CRs, CRDs?
So basically, Velero has a discovery. Velero has a discovery mechanism. So whatever part of your namespace is, like whatever CIDs you have, it can back up. So by a discovery process.
Okay,
Yeah.
but
For example, like you have some CRs, like your custom CRs, right? It can back up that as well.
I'm not really sure how that would work because this is just getting a little bit technical, but CRDs are not namespaced, right? So that would mean it needs to kind of back up the CRD as well.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Right. So basically, for example, just to give you an example, like Velero, so for example, there is a resource called as a role and role binding, right?
Yeah.
So if you back up a role, then Velero automatically backs up the role binding resource as well. So dependencies. So it will do that, the same kind for CRDs. So if you back up your CR, then the CRDs will also get backed up.
Yeah.
Or you can just specify, while creating a backup, you can specify what resources you would like to back up, like your CRD. So you can mention your CRD clearly, hey, I would like to back up my CRD, CRs, and the resource list you can provide to Velero, and Velero will do that for you.
Right. My background is basically like if we have a custom operator running in a different cluster, but then that would even have problems, right? Because owner references would reference UUID, and then that would be different in a different cluster.
So for operators, like Velero doesn't know, right, what CRs to create first and what CRs to create next. So here we will have to do some extra work here for in case of operator restoring.
Okay.
So you would need to tell Velero, hey, restore this CR. So you need to provide some orders there. Hey, first you restore this X CR, Y CR, something like that, and then it can work. I mean, but yeah, Velero doesn't have any idea about your operator, so it just knows like, hey, back up this resource and restore. So you will have to tell it like, or you can write a script to achieve whatever you're trying to do, or write your plugin for your operator. So you can do that. I mean.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you for listening to us. Hope that was helpful. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
From 12 to 1, and after that we'll be having session on turbocharging, technical enablement, and